morning. I'm not going to formally preach from it. It's just really an example of the principle of reporting on experience. But this morning, the church is gathered together, and I would like to declare to you on our journey what I feel like God has done up to this point. And so, the state of the church 2012. We just got to give the tech crew a hand for that. We just have the best people ever. I'm telling you what. The state of the church is transparent. We are a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. Our liability insurance is in force. We lease this building on a very fragile month-to-month situation, but so far, so good. All of our leaders have been background screened by fingerprinting. If you have a criminal record, we know about it. Several refused, but I know what that means. We have accountability on the local, the regional, and the national level in two different forms to our network of churches, which is known as the Assemblies of God. That network has about 13,000 churches in the U.S., many, many more outside the United States. About 60 million people around the world are adherents to the particular network that we represent. And it is fair to say that around the world, this cluster of churches is aligned with the poor and the marginalized everywhere. That is our calling card, particularly in the developing nations. Our financial accountability is very strict. Every 30 days, our books are submitted to a CPA firm, which is chosen by our network. They review those and annually do an audit of what we're doing financially. So there's almost real-time accountability in terms of that level. Everything else locally is always handled by at least two people so that we know that things are being done in a way that's really ship-shape. We have no payroll. So you can't steal money when you don't get paid, right? So it's really simple, really clear, really easy. We have no debt. Our total Sunday income goes into essentially supplying this space, which is not the capstone, but the launching pad for the things we would like to do to serve the campus and the city, in addition to supporting missionaries who bring the good news about Jesus to other countries around the world, compassion outreaches, and the coffee that you drank this morning, which comes from Pete's, our local Berkeley coffee brand. We like to think that it's a sheet of glass between you and what goes on in our inner workings. In other words, you can see through it and actually know what's going on because we've maintained accountability and transparency. Now, the church challenge is going to be to keep things that transparent as we grow and things get more complicated, because there's just more moving parts. And what you'll find is that your personal challenge on the issue of transparency is to trust us. Because that's easy when we're all sitting in a circle in my living room. When there are 100 of us and you only know the name of the next 9 people in your row, it gets harder because it's more anonymous. Does that make sense? See how that kind of tracks? And so the challenge is to extend trust to the leaders, and in return, we extend transparency to the congregation, and everybody wins because we've all got what we need from that equation. The state of the church is transparent. The state of the church is also in Berkeley. People ask me all the time, why would you go there? You know the phrase, don't go there? Most of my friends put Berkeley at the end of that sentence. And I tell them, why would you go anywhere else? This is the best place in the world. Berkeley people are the best people ever. And I could prove this because I can show it to you in films. And if the thing is true in the movies, it's true. So in the last Star Trek film, where is Starfleet Command and the Starfleet Academy located? You guys need to pay attention more when you're at the AMC. It's in San Francisco. In Terminator Salvation, on the flip side of the coin, where is Skynet located? It's in San Francisco. Now, I want to submit to you, if the soul-destroying, humanity-crushing robots of Skynet's Terminators feel that this is the place to be. This is the place to be, with no exceptions. Urban planning research indicates quite clearly that this region that we live in now is the single greatest pool of creative talent in the United States. Now, I can't say that that's true in the whole world, but for us, this is where it's at. There's more venture capital available within 50 miles of where we're standing than any place else on the planet. And the reason that we came here and the reason that people gathered together to make 360 happen was because we know that the people in places like this are the people who shape the future of the world, and to see their scrambled hearts be put back together like Jason's Rubik Cube demonstration this morning would change their imagination, it would change their ideas, and through their initiative from corporate entrepreneurship to social entrepreneurship, the world can become a different place. Now, our philosophy is really simple. You want to get stinking rich? Knock yourself out, but don't buy the second BMW until everybody's child can read. Leave the Gucci loafers on the rack until there's clean drinking water everywhere on this planet. Now, drive down to the Gucci store in your Bentley if you want to, but don't buy the second one until you make sure that the good news about Jesus is being heard by everybody in every nation, everywhere. After that, knock yourself out, man. You know, get your Gucci briefcase and wear your Armani suits, as long as there's nowhere on earth where people who need inoculations against malaria don't have that. And the people who can make all of that happen live in places like this and go to schools like ours, and that's why we just love this place. Pete's Coffee and cheeseboard pizza don't hurt either, but I'll tell you, I think if I weren't doing a church startup, I would just live here anyway. I mean, it's just the absolute best. Now, Jeff and I had quite a discussion the other day about there's no typical Berkeley person. We would all agree with that. There's so much diversity here. But we had quite a talk about some of the tendencies that you see in Berkeley folks. And if I had to identify what some of those might be for people, I would say this. A Berkeley person is skeptical, proud, educated, in pain, transient, use the place and move on, permanent, want the city to stay exactly as it is forever in the 1960s, has very few friends but is close to the people they do know, and is exhausted almost all the time. You gotta love that. How can you not love that person? I mean, this is the individual that when God rains down in their life and their imagination is opened up to the mind of Christ, this is an individual who can do anything. Absolutely anything. And so our challenge on a church level is to reflect what truly is this city, rather than to try to copy things that have worked somewhere else that is not this city. And our challenge on an individual level is to love this place and not just live here. Now, I've got to tell you, when I arrived, I thought I loved the city, but I realized I loved it on the Google level. And by that I mean that it's much easier to love something when you know it as a set of statistics. The first time you pass a person on the sidewalk dressed like a costumed superhero, or someone who is shouting profanity at a very loud voice out into the air to no one who is listening except God, or you read a story in the paper like the one that happened this week where we had our first homicide of the year, and the police investigating the crime found 80 shell casings. 2 shooters, 1 man assassinated. It means they reloaded. And you just step back and you go, it's like what happens to you when you get married 3 weeks after the wedding. It's the same thing. You get into it on the statistical level. Oh, she's nice, he's nice. I think they're good looking. They have good job prospects. This will all work out fine. And 19 days later, you're ready to go to the gun store. And 80 bullets isn't nearly enough. You have that same kind of shock when you get here, but you know what that shock is? That's the hammer of God landing on your heart to crack it open so that real love can get in. And real love takes a while. I think our challenge individually, and I'm speaking in this way for all of us, not to you, but with you, is to really put our arms around this place, whether it's the city or the university or what part of it is, and truly love it, because people can tell the difference when it's really love, when it's really concern, or whether they're just a target or a client or an enemy. The state of the church is in Berkeley. The state of the church is diverse. I know we're young. It's so funny, people say to me sometimes, I get so much advice. People say to me, you're never going to make that work with all students. They're not wealthy. Because Jesus said, come and make disciples of everyone who has a lot of money. And then next conversation, I'll see the same person and say, man, we just don't have any young people. I don't know what's wrong. So what we have achieved is what the rest of the congregations in the United States are praying for and often do not have. Isn't that awesome? We're already there because we have lots of young people, and it's so exciting. Jan and I just think that's fantastic. It's just wonderful. And yet within that fairly young demographic, we have quite a bit of diversity. I mean, think of it in fashion terms. We have Ben Sherman people. We have Calvin Klein people. We have Old Navy people. We have North Face people. We have Abercrombie and Fitch people. We have, I got these on the clearance rack at Ross people. And we have those I would call post-fashion, as in myself. People say, well, what's your style? I say, fashion is what people used to do, really. We've moved so far beyond that. It's just the way the scripture says it's one body, many fashionistas. So if many fashions coming together, and it's just kind of a simple metaphor for what it's like to bring people together who are different. We are very committed to having many different kinds of people here. We have multiple English speakers here. What other languages do we have represented in this room this morning? Who speaks a language you would consider yourself fluent in something other than English?
Chinese.
Mandarin?
Yes.
Japanese? Spanish? Arabic? Tagalog?
Pig Latin.
Pig Latin? Excellent. Samoan? Anybody else? French? Russian?
Sign.
When you add all that up, it's you almost have to ask the question the other way around. The English-only speakers are almost a minority here. I am just thrilled by that. It's just absolutely thrilling to see that kind of diversity come together. I think our challenge as a church will be, as we grow this year, to integrate older people and families and younger people and children. And so we can broaden out the kind of people we represent by adding those dimensions and whoever else that the Lord would send to us or we would meet. And the notion of all of us being together from different starting points is really, that's a powerful attraction for me. I recently got this, man, I get a lot of advice. I got this one in the mail. This is from a company that I'm not going to name. And they say that the way to solve all of our problems and create the future we need to have is to publish our own church cookbook. This is the solution. Now, you talk to anyone who's in a multicultural or multi-ethnic situation, and they tell you that food can be one of the biggest struggles that you'll have, because it's tough to get people to agree on how to cook stuff. I know that sounds strange, but that's true across the country. I found that everywhere. So these people solve it by having everybody submit recipes, and you're going to then put those recipes into a cookbook, and you sell them as a fundraiser for bus trips to Branson, I guess. I'm not sure what, but I picked this up and I thought, this is not really us. You know, in Berkeley, don't cook. If you do, all you eat is ramen noodles, because that means you're a student and you're just trying to survive, just holding on by a thread. But other than that, but your goal when you graduate is to never cook again. That's the whole point. But that was really what bothered me, was these people are on the front are so white. They're past white. They're pale. I think they've been attacked by vampires, and all the blood's been, sucked out of them. And I saw this this monocultural thing, and I just immediately went, get the chains of garlic around our neck and keep the monsters away, because that's just not what we are. We have never been that way, and it's not what we're going. I had a dear friend who's passed away who said something, spoken in my life, that I've never forgotten, and it was, whenever the Spirit of God moves, diversity increases. And so if we're going to be recipients of God's power, diversity is going to come. That's our church level challenge. On the individual challenge, I think on this issue, what it comes down to for me and for all of us is, when we're in socially oriented situations, whether it's a small group or maybe just here eating cookies, we really need to pay attention to making sure that no one is subtly marginalized. Because it's a little awkward to reach out to a new person, or it may be someone who is not my color, or doesn't speak my language, or doesn't, I'm Old Navy and he's Calvin Klein, who, they look sad and dress in black. I don't want anything to do with him. In those informal situations, I know this sounds like a trivial thing almost, but if you've been with people in groups, you know that's a challenge. And there's really quiet, unspoken ways in which you can telegraph to people that they are not part of you, and that we don't care whether you really ever are. I've even seen that happen in my house. And that's something that I think just on an individual level, we have to take initiative in stepping into those situations. There's no program for that. It's a heart thing and a commitment thing. And in so doing, being ambassadors for what we represent. So the state of the church is diverse. The state of the church is also fragile. Our startup could stop in so many ways. I can't even count the number of things that could go wrong. But what comforts me in that is that we are not unlike every other startup in the world in that regard. There's just lots of ways that the wheels can fall off. And Jason and I were talking about this morning. If you were the bold primary visionary leader, shouldn't you have absolute confidence that everything will work? Are you kidding? Have you ever tried to organize anything in your world? What you do is you take your best shot and you trust God it's going to work out. The scripture says that hope that's seen isn't really hope. That if you know for sure, it's not really a faith trip. And this is a faith trip for us. That's also the excitement of it, the romance of it, the danger of it, the draw of it. That I would rather do this than anything, because you're just working without a net. And it's not an experience that you get to have very many times in life outside of a startup of some kind, either in business or whatever. And I hope you find that appealing too. Not everybody does. Not everybody likes it out on the edge. Some people prefer a superhighway to a tightrope. But in this business, you're walking the tightrope. And the state of the church is fragile in that regard because of its nature as a startup enterprise. And essentially, too, because we have gotten this far because we've been funded by people from elsewhere. I mentioned that we have no payroll, which is kind of an unusual thing to say, but that's because all our pastors are supported by churches and individuals that live in other places. That shows us how much they believe in reaching Berkeley. But it forces the question of how much do we believe it? What are we willing to invest to be able to do that. This year, what we want to do is to be able to pay our rent and our other ministry expenses without having to draw on the savings that we accumulated to get us this far. In other words, to pay everything out of cash flow, just like you would your household budget. Nothing fancy about that. It's an exact parallel to running your checkbook at home. We believe that that is totally possible this year. And so on a church level, that's our challenge, financial sustainability, so that we end of the year, we've got some reserves like an organization should, but we're able to move forward out of the cash flow that we take in. On a personal level, I think the challenge is this is the year to give. We're going to talk with you a lot this year, not about giving as an onerous burden that we carry, but about the blessing of being a generous person. And this is the year I'm going to ask you to consider significant, generous giving to the church. Lots of people use the tithe, the 10%, as the standard for that kind of giving, and we'll address that in more detail at another time. But to really catch the excitement of this, to really be an investor and not part of the audience, that commitment, I think, is necessary because where your treasure is, there your heart is also. And when we're all taking that risk, then we're all really in it together. Now you might hear 10%, isn't that crazy? Yes! That's the whole point. That's what makes it work, the crazy factor. We are fragile, and you know what? I hope we always are. I hope we are always out on the edge, always trying with more than we have, always reaching beyond what's in hand, always going for it, and always then having to be on our face saying, God, if you don't help us, none of this is going to happen. If we ever get beyond that, then I hope we get out of the business. We're fragile. The state of the church is experimental. We are not afraid to get it wrong. We were going to come here with a large, talented, multicultural team of people. That was wrong. I was going to get a part-time job with my communication degree teaching at Cal. That was wrong. Friday night was the best night to meet at our house. That was wrong. We were going to hold reggae night on 420. That was wrong. No one could remember that the event was scheduled. I was going to redesign the website. That was so wrong. So wrong. I think I'd have to say that in general, it takes us between 2 and 4 flops to get to a success. Now, not always. Some stuff works just like it does at your house. But if we ever get to the point where we're afraid of the flops, we will never get to the victories. It's a trial and error process. And what I love about our leadership team is whenever we talk about something that we might undertake or we might give something a whack, somebody in the room will say, oh, let's try it. If it doesn't work, we'll do something else. And they all go, yeah, that's fine. Because, see, we've just flopped so many times that you lose your fear of it. I mean, I've been working in the area of public speaking since I was a child, and sometimes people ask me, do you ever have stage fright, or what about the fear of being embarrassed? And I say, are you kidding? I've done so many things so wrong so often, I'm not afraid of it anymore. I'm completely desensitized. Like people who are afraid to fly, they get them on the plane, they roll them down the runway, and their anxiety drops, and they fly a little bit, their anxiety drops. That's just like me. I mean, everything has gone wrong so often. About 9 o'clock one Sunday morning, about 2 months ago, I had on a pair of gray slacks, old Calvin Kleins. And the zipper just went BAM! Oh, no. I mean, this left no stone unturned. I mean, this was a full-on 100% wardrobe malfunction. There was no behind here. And I realized this while I'm in the men's room, and people are starting to come in. The band's coming in to start warming up, and it's like, what do? I have to pull my... Good morning, everybody. Welcome to J60 Church. Or do I get duct tape? You know, like 10 rolls around my waist or something like that. I'm in a panic. Run downstairs, jump in the car, waving at people who are coming up the steps while I'm going down. Hey, good to have you here today. Run down to the car, jump in, drive home, throw on some old jeans, drive back, and try to walk in and become part of this experience like nothing happened. And people say, oh, don't you get tense? Please! That's my average day. That's a day in the life. And that's the kind of the ethos and the drift of how we've approached everything. Make reasonable choices, but expect that you're going to have a certain failure rate, and then from the failure rate you learn and things get better, and you make the right choice. Now, the challenge for us as the church is going to be to stay with that. See, it's one thing when we're just together around boxes of pizza and a guitar and we don't have anything. We're in somebody's living room or somebody's dorm room. We've been in all those rooms. Or we're in a tiny little hotel conference room, or we're sitting out on a wall at Cal or something like that. Then it's all good and it's easy because you don't have anything to lose. But as the Lord begins to do stuff and we begin to become involved in that stuff, eventually in the form of assets or people or relationships or whatever, you do start to have more chips on the table, and so you bet less because the losses are bigger now. We have to be willing to risk losses, or we'll never find our future. No great startup enterprise of any kind finds its future without multiple failures along the way. I have a friend in the Northwest who has done this amazingly innovative kind of church startup, but to get to it, they had to do 4 different tries, all of which collapsed in humiliating public failure. It was the 5th one. And that brings me to the personal challenge, which is we have to give up the worship of cool. Cool is the god of popular culture. It is in Old Testament terms, the Baal, because it's attached to everything and anything you like and to nothing you don't. It is where it's so easy to bow down, to mix it into faith or into no faith. It works both ways. A church that is experimental says we value fruitfulness above image. We're committed to people, not to appearances. We would rather be faithful and obedient than be thought of as cool. Now, I've got to tell you, this may be the hardest thing I'm saying this morning. This is tough because this is so endemic to our culture that disentangling it from what we do, well, it's a journey. It's a hard thing to do. So the basic criteria for further involvement here is the ability to withstand crushing humiliation. I really know how to give a recruiting pitch, don't I? Right in the heart. It's hitting you right in the heart. If you're the kind of person that's never had a string of those, we are going to help you. Because we're going to help you put yourself in a position to be so embarrassed, to have to come back to people and to God and say, will you please help me? Because if you don't help me and if God doesn't help me, we can't really get this done. That's the startup mentality. That's why most people don't want to do it. Because they'd rather be cool. I'll tell you this though, I'll make you this promise. If you go with cool, you can have a reputation short run. If you go with risk, you'll have a reputation for life. Because you'll be associated with enduring fruitfulness, not transient style. And you will be a player all your life. We're going to give you the opportunity to play for the long haul, rather than the flash in the pan of here and now. The state of the church is experimental. The state of the church is also evolving. Our story is one of change and growth. Things are pretty simple right now. We have this on Sunday morning. Leadership team gets together on Wednesday night, and about once a month we do an outreach event, and we've tried really hard to keep it simple. So for one thing, we wouldn't wear everybody to a frazzle, and also so you would just have time to be in relationship with the people that you care about in your dorm, your apartment building, wherever you live, to reach out to them. And can I say this so that you can just have a life? life. So you can't have a church if everybody doesn't have a life. Sometimes people explain it like, if you can just do the church right, then in the margins around it, we'll let you have a life by our permission. We feel like Jesus just, if he really is my life and with me in all of my life, then you need a little time to do that. Now in 2012, we'll evolve and broaden what we're involved in. I think what I see coming from our group's discussion will be some small group fellowships, some more regular fellowship times of just getting together. Who's for fun? Yes, more fun. Hoo-wah, yeah, Super Bowl party, those kinds of things. And I would like to see a whole bunch of children. Tons of kids. Tons of kids. Now the point of that is not to have more machinery, because I really don't want to spend the rest of my life in more meetings. The point of that is to turn Sunday morning from a destination into a single point in a growth pathway, so that a person is able to really find themselves in God here, and to be able to then pursue that and to find where all of those things lead. And you do that in a network of relationships with other people, not just on your own. The challenge for the church is going to be to keep things from being too busy and too complicated so that we lose the point of what we're doing. The point of what we're doing is to reach out to people, give them the opportunity to consider, as George Hunter says, the Christian possibilities for their lives. And I would know that was happening if we were water baptizing people every Sunday morning. We have been given the funds by another church to buy a portable water baptistry. It's so awesome. You fill it with a garden hose. It's going to go right through the floor the first time you fill it. Directly into the startup business downstairs. I'm going to put it right up against the wall over here when the UPS people bring it. I think it weighs like 3 million pounds. They'll never get it up here. We're going to put it right there, and it's going to be our reminder that we'll start to get happier when we're baptizing people every single Sunday morning. Is there anybody else who would like to see that? Who would be excited to see that? I wasn't asking for a show of hands actually, but let's have one. Is there anybody else that would like to see that? Because apart from that, you're just kind of doing church. That's really payday. That's really what it's about. We're evolving forward. We want to be a place that is a greenhouse where what God has put in you can grow. Rather than a factory where you are the labor pool for the lead pastor's vision for global conquest. And the church is essentially the human resources department of the kingdom of God. God's already put amazing stuff in you. We want to be a place where it just gets a chance to come out. Does that sound good? That sounds good. That may lead you to being more engaged, busier than ever. I don't know. But if it's all coming from God, then it's all going to be okay too. I have a friend who just wrote a blog in a pretty well-known Christian venue, and it was called 9 Reasons Not to Plant a Church in 2012. And it really should have been entitled 9 Reasons Never to Plant a Church in Any Year. It was sort of the anti-state of the church message. And I read through it. This is someone I met on the road years ago and I've kept in touch with off and on occasionally, electronically. And it essentially says in 9 different ways, having congregations worship on Sunday morning is a bad thing. And the reason it's bad is you throw all your time and energy and everything into doing this event, and the event is only of interest to people who already have faith, and it distracts you from other kinds of ministry out in the community that really is not the only, but the main valid thing that you should be involved in. And I thought, you can do a congregation in a way that makes every one of those 9 reasons true. Or you can try to find God's heart for your church, the initiative of the Holy Spirit for us as a group and for us individually, and release that from a place like this into the community in ways that touch people with initiatives that we don't have names for yet. My friend is absolutely right that if what we're doing here becomes an end in itself, we should go out of existence because we are doing more harm than good. We are using up resources that could be better deployed in other ways, and the opportunity costs of that are just too high. We came here to find God's dream for the city, God's dream for the church, and God's dream for each of you. And I know to the bottom of me that when those things are released, there's this wonderful, paradoxical, hybrid environment that can come together where you have a transcendent meeting with God in a large group environment that makes you better at doing the other things, not worse. So I had this dream. It was last Thursday night, and early in the morning, just before I got up. Are your most vivid dreams in the morning, the ones that you remember? Well, this one was really amazingly vivid. Now, I've been reading about dreams, so I know that I almost never remember. They drift negative and all these things, but this one, it was none of that. In the dream, I was speaking in a large rectangular room. It wasn't here, it was somewhere else. It just stretched wall to wall, and the place where I was speaking from was sort of right in the middle of the long wall. The lights were turned way down, and it was just jammed with people. And the people were, I don't know how to describe it, they were just dressed all different ways. They didn't belong together. They didn't belong together. That's how I'd have to say it. And they weren't seated in rows of chairs. It was all chairs and coffee tables and couches, all mixed up together. And there were so many people. There was like up on the arms of the chairs and hanging off the couch. It was just jammed with them all around. And I was standing in the middle of that long wall, and I was giving a talk on how God wanted us to reach out and touch our city. And I remember so vividly that what I was expressing to this dream group was that God wanted us to use large group settings like Sunday morning, small group settings in homes, and third place settings like a coffee house where you would meet a friend. And then I repeated it. God wants us to use large group settings like Sunday morning, small group settings like in your house, and third place settings like a coffee house where you would meet with a friend. And I illustrated the point with a story about visiting Alcatraz. Here's the fly in the ointment. I have never been to Alcatraz. Although I did see the pilot of the TV show, which may have been the genesis of this. And I started to relate this kind of what in dream terms now seemed like an elaborate account of this visit to Alcatraz that never took place. And when I woke up, I thought, you know, where did that come from? And I realized that that trip to Alcatraz, the place I've never been, I was there once in a dream I had had the week before. I felt like Leonardo DiCaprio relating the content of one dream to dream people in another dream state. And I woke up from that and I thought, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for a vision of the next place. Thank you, God, for a vision of all of the people that will be involved in that. Thank you for a vision of their diversity, a vision of their informality, of their lack of concern with image and reputation. Thank you for their closeness, the warmth, the love that I felt. Thank you for their excitement, for the spiritual energy, for the power of that experience. Thank you for these three ideas. Thank you for explaining one dream inside another dream, whatever that means. And you know what? I put my arms around it. Now, I don't know how that dream will be fleshed out. That's what leaders do. We discern how dreams are fleshed out and how they are placed in real world terms. But what I believe is, I think God was giving me a flash forward of the future. Now, this has never happened to me. I don't have public speaking dreams, ever. I have that, I went in on the wrong day for the midterm. I have that dream, but not these. And as I'm sharing these simple thoughts with you today, this is all I'm saying. I hope that you'll reach out and put your arms around this. That where we're headed can be a dream for you. An alternative future that we cannot reach individually, we can only reach together. But on a trip that is going to be so worth taking. I'm going to ask you to stand with me if you would please, and ask our band to come back and lead us in some more worship. Let's just open our hearts up to the Lord, see what He would say to us, and then we're going to have a time of prayer before we do.